Welcome to this week's reading. And we're in the midst of the summer and hope that you're able to find the time in your busy summer schedule to immerse yourself in what we're reading in the divided kingdom era. No man knows the future. It must be revealed to him by God because every man is limited by knowledge. He cannot know and see what's happening in the future. But a prophet, God brings a prophet into the story by allowing the prophet to see what he himself sees. So two illustrations stand out from this past reading that show us how the prophet surveys the future. The first, we see that Isaiah sees the future of King Hezekiah's descendants. And you see this in the story when Hezekiah has recovered from illness and he's congratulated by this emissary from, it seems like a long distance away from Babylon, and he opens up the doors of his treasury. He shows him the temple. He shows him all of his wealth and so on. And then Isaiah comes and he confronts him, and he says, "So what all did you show this emissary from this long distance?" And he's just like, "Well, it's not a big deal because they're so far away." And Isaiah said, "You know what? They may be far away, but one day God's going to bring them and they're going to take your grandchildren into captivity." And this is his response to that. "Well, as long as it doesn't happen in my day." Well, sad words. It did come to pass, and we'll be introduced to Daniel, who was one of those great grandchildren taken into captivity by the Babylonians. Isaiah also sees God's decisive rule over the nations, and it is absolute. In Isaiah chapters 1, verse 39 to chapter 39, we focus on Judah's facing the Assyrian invasion in the early 7th century BC. You see their attempt to escape the Assyrians by seeking Egyptian protection or alliances. Isaiah also sees Judah's future Babylonian captivity and their return to Judah. And you see this in chapter 40, 44, 45, when he introduces the prophecies regarding Cyrus, that there would come a king who would decree that Judah would be allowed to go back and rebuild the temple and rehabit the land of Israel. And in fact, Isaiah made this prophecy about 200 years prior to that event. Isaiah also sees a redeeming God at work, and that God's work is in a troubled, broken world. He includes a full scope of his life, of Christ's life, the Messiah's life, with the announcement of his coming. He tells us he's coming in Isaiah 40. He tells us about his virgin birth in chapter 7, verse 14, his proclamation of the good news in Isaiah 61, verse 1 through 3. In fact, when we're introduced to the Gospels, when Jesus stands up on that incredible day, when he returns to Nazareth to present himself as the Messiah to his own birthplace, or his place where he has lived for all these years since he was born in Bethlehem, he stands up in the temple, as was his custom, and he opens up to Isaiah, and he reads these verses from Isaiah 61, and he says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. The Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the captive, to liberate those in captivity, that those who don't see will be able to see, and so on. And so you see this pronouncement was made by Isaiah himself. He also sees his sacrificial death, and this is found in the famous chapter Isaiah 53 and also the conclusion of Isaiah 52. He also sees the Messiah's return to his own people in chapter 60, verses 2 through 3. So indeed, the Lord is the one who saves his people from themselves. Isaiah sees all of these truths. And so when we read the book of Isaiah, we should be encouraged because Isaiah teaches us to see through prophetic eyes. Isaiah wants us to see that God is in the midst of our cultural surroundings. He wants to instill hope in us as we see by faith God's redeeming activity in our midst. We need hope, and the only way we'll ever have hope is seeing what God sees. And Isaiah invites us to see that. Aren't you glad that we have the book of Isaiah?